Hello, and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending where you are joining from. Welcome to our Cloud Lunch and Learn session today. I hope you are excited about our topic today, which is all about infrastructure as a code in Azure, specifically the using this new Bicep language. And we are going to talk more about productivity, the tips, and how you can get up to speed with that quickly and use certain things that are coming as part of the extension of this language called Bicep extension. And plus, what is new, in terms of new extensibility features and new settings that you can go and enable with this language so that you can do more productive work. And sometimes, being honest, I will also show you how you want to disable certain features if they stay on your way of productivity. And this might be an annoying feature that you want to just remove. So I hope you are excited about that and you are having a great, wonderful morning. I will be on the studio, monitoring myself, meaning I will be watching chat. So if you see that your message is not getting, answered right away, so just be patient a little bit. I see Usman joined, Andrew joined. Welcome, guys. Thank you for joining this session. If you just joined this session, you didn't miss much. We just started, so just put the text message there. Greetings. Hi, Mazda. Welcome to the studio from India, I believe. Andrew is from Britain, if I remember correct. Uh, Everyone, welcome to the studio. Yes, thank you, Andrew, for your message. Are definitely looking for that great stuff. That said, actually, before starting this session, I know that you joined from different parts of the world. If you can also actually put a brief description in the text in the YouTube channel, saying that what's your experience so far with Azure Bicep, what you are doing, if you are using anything special, any modules that are, let's say, there are like Bicep public modules, there are Azure verified modules. There is also Azure Bicep landing zones, right? That's where you can start building your whole ecosystem, whole new environment, just using the Azure Bicep and some of the PowerShell scripts that's coming part of it. So it's not like completely Azure Bicep, so to speak, because as you know, if you are using some Azure tenant level stuff, right? And you want to create users, you want to create in Azure Microsoft Entra, you want to create the users, user groups, and other things. There are certain things that Azure Bicep is not able to do, and the reason for that is Azure Bicep is not fully on version 1.0. Okay, that's the one of the reasons. And second reason is that it's gonna be in development. It's in the pipeline. It's coming, and I will show you know what I mean by that. Yeah, hello again, 77 Sijam, that's the name. Usman, welcome. Just started learning bicep, great to know, Usman. Okay, then we have Alan Florence, he's always joining our session. Kudos to Alan and everybody who is not missing any of these Cloud Launch and Learn sessions. Last time, on our last session, last week, we had a great session with Tim Warner, right? And it was all about GitHub Actions. And speaking about GitHub Actions, part of this presentation today is going to cover that GitHub Action workflow in terms of how you can automatically pick up the check-ins into your GitHub, right? So that you can build up directly from on each commit. You can verify your Azure Bicep code and build from that GitHub workflows right away. So that's going to be part of the session as well. Then I see Alan using it verified modules in-house and verified modules. That's awesome. And Alan, maybe one day we need to kind of go into Copilot mode where you and I can present that verified Azure modules. That sounds interesting to me. Everybody would be interested in that. All right. Okay, cool. That's all great. Let's kick off this session, and then look into agenda, and then move forward one by one. I'm going to decouple uh, this session for everyone. So if you are just starting with Azure Bicep, this is also a perfect session for you to watch and get started. So again, welcome to the studio. Let's kick start now after a little bit of introduction about So this is a little bit information about myself. Probably, you if you have been watching Cloud Marathoner movement, which is the hashtag in the LinkedIn, and I also try to do that also on Twitter X, right? We don't call it Twitter anyway anymore. So that's part there. You can follow the things that I'm trying to contribute to the community. My name is Elhan. Okay, I'm a long time Microsoft certified trainer. uh, Actually, I have been selected to be Microsoft Certified Regional Lead for the US region for 2024. So I'm glad to be there. So if you are also training, doing some technical training, let me know. Give a shout out there. I'll be happy to help. And you can find there's like different venues where I'm posting about the things that are main purpose is to help the new MCTs and the people who are doing some training using the mock. I'm a MVP in Azure, and I mostly work with DevSecOps, some security architecture, and infrastructure as a code related, areas. Um, in addition, I have this healthcare background that you can, also see. Sorry, sometimes my voice will go off due to allergies. So sorry for that. Okay, so let's continue here. If you want to get in touch with me again, please use the LinkedIn or Twitter X, depending your preference. I also blog, and I'm the founder of the Cloud Marathoner blog post, so you are also welcome to check it. I didn't have any recent posts there, but it's coming in the April. March month was just very busy. Okay, that's it. Let's look at what we will cover today. So usually in these Azure Bicep sessions, I want to cover the basics first because there's always some new people who are just starting to learn about Azure Bicep, and this is really helpful. Let me look here to the screen. Uh, all right, let's go. So first we will start with what is Azure Bicep, okay? And I will monitor the chat from time to time. So again, bear with me there if you don't see that I'm not able to address your question right away. I will come back to that. So first we'll start with Azure Bicep, what it is, what make it different, what's the relation to the Azure ecosystem in general, right? So how it get deployed, what it depends on, and stuff like that. Then we'll look into Bicep language fundamentals and its benefits, what type of specific things you would learn from it and why you need to care. Then we'll look into some productivity tips, what type of tooling is around Azure Bicep, how you can use that, how you can, for example, even visualize your resources so that you know dependencies between those resources and you understand what you are dealing with. Next, we'll look into updates on Azure Bicep, what type of new features, experimental features are in the language, and how you can enable or disable them. So, because both of them are very important, right? It's not just about, putting that very new feature into play, but it's also sometimes about removing that, sorry, from your IDE, from your VS Code, so that it doesn't if you are not using that and it causes some issues, you should be able to disable that one as well. So, and next we'll look into again updates on Azure Bicep, and then we'll look some demos over the course of this presentation. You will look into some demos. Some of them are going to be introduction level, but that's important part of the learning process. We start from fundamentals, we'll brush them up, and then we'll build up till the point where we'll look into the GitHub workflows, where we'll automate our deployment into the environment. Right? Okay, that's it. Let's go here. So this is the information. Next, I'm going to give a little information about the T-Rex Solutions. This is the company where I'm employed, and the infographic that you see here is one of the probably you saw one of the activity areas where they do the work. Namely, there are some different government agencies where the cloud modernization work is done. Uh, so uh, this is one of the, I believe, in my opinion, best of the companies in the area here in DC area, and I'm happy to work and deliver those mission critical systems to our customers in our daily engagements. And I'm also happy to lead the team of cloud engineers and architects in this company. We have some strong partnership with different cloud solution providers, and our company does support development of local communities in the area. We have some open positions that are actually targeted for the for people across the US. So if you are interested or you are looking for some new opportunities, check them out. But before submitting your candidacy, please reach back to me. Let's have conversation and let's see which position will suit you best, and if you are actually able to, if your requirements actually meet that, so you know that you are applying to something that will make sense to you and you can have a better chance to land the job, right? Okay, so please direct message to me on LinkedIn. I'll try to help with that. Next here, what we have is, we'll start with what is Azure Bicep. And before diving into that, let me check the chat here. Okay, also same. Okay, I see Alan and Andrew. They are using the Bicep for a while. I recognize those names. So again, welcome to the session. And you are using some Azure Landing Zone stuff as well. That's great. Um, and if you want, you can also put some. I'm also very happy to collect that feedback. So with Azure Landing Zones or Azure Verified modules, whenever you are working with them, if you get into issues, or let's say there are some feedback that you want to provide to the Microsoft team, I would be very happy to collect them on your behalf. You can put that in the chat. Okay. And any improvement points are welcome at this stage, because they are still getting into that a stable stage where they can be used. So just saying it here, so that if you have any feedback regarding Azure Bicep, or any official repo like Azure Verified modules, Azure Landing Zones, please let me know. I'll be glad to look into that. Mhm. What if? Yes, improving what if is one of the things. I agree with that. Thank you, Alan. So let's switch back to the slides here. I checked the chat for a while, but let's go here with the where we left. So what's Azure Bicep? Azure Bicep is a DSL, which stands for Domain Specific Language, that transpiles your ARM template into Bicep language code. So what is ARM template? You will see that in the uh, next slide. But ARM template is basically native JSON representation of resources in Azure environment. And what Bicep language does, it's basically another layer of abstraction on top of ARM templates, where it simplifies creation of resources, right? You can easily edit, manage them in a way that it looks like infrastructure as a code, it feels like infrastructure as a code, but at the end of the day, the Bicep code that you write get transpiles, or uh, get converted into ARM template, and then applied to the ARM layer of the Azure. And you will see that in the next diagram. Then we already say that it's a transparent abstraction over ARM. Um, it's much easier way to get started with infrastructure code in Azure. It's fully supported, and again, it transpiles into ARM templates. Right, that's the main points here. And the main, again, main purpose of this Azure Bicep language is to make it easy to write infrastructure as a code for developers and DevOps engineers. That's the main purpose. And why it is main purpose? Because previously we had this ARM template, which was JSON representation of the Azure resources, which was not easy to start with. It's cumbersome. It's a machine kind of oriented representation of the resources. So there was much higher learning curve to get understand everything and get proficient with that. So with ARM template, that barrier is gone, and you are, even if you have a very, let's say, sorry, very beginner level coding skills, which you don't, which you need a little bit in the beginning, you can get started with Bicep. So let's look at the relationship between that Azure Bicep, which gets transposed into ARM template. Okay, and this infographics actually, I borrowed that from Microsoft Learn, explains that, right? So here what we see is, again, Azure Bicep file will create that in using the Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to actually do it right after this presentation. We'll switch into the Visual Studio Code, and then by using Azure Bicep, you can define your resource type, your API version, and properties that are same and valid on ARM template. And anything that you can do or you were able to do on Azure ARM templates is doable on Azure Bicep. Okay. And when you compare between, this, again, Azure ARM template is not this Azure Resource Manager, but when your Azure Bicep get compiled into ARM templates, it get passed into your Azure Resource Manager, and from there, it's basically deploys and makes updates to the Azure, resource and Azure providers to your Azure subscription, to your Azure environment. Okay, so to recap that, Azure ARM template is a templating engine based on JSON representation, and all the declaration use the JSON, while Bicep language is the way to define Azure resources as a code. That's the biggest difference. But enough to talk. I think it would make sense to go and make our first demo, right? So everybody can get up to speed with that. Let's switch to Visual Studio Code here. Okay, I switched to Visual Studio Code. Let me actually close these all tabs. Are you able to see the Visual Studio Code? Please let me know. I will wait a little bit for this switch to happen. Okay, yeah, looks like we are good. Okay, so here what we are going to do is, what you see now is this is the GitHub repo that's I'm going to use over this presentation, and where you can find it is actually the location is here, and let me drop that in the chat. Let me bring actually the see where it is. Okay, GitHub, here it is. So GitHub. So if you go and let me open the GitHub here, bear with me. So if you end up um, in the GitHub, you would be able to see that there's a learn bicep. And let me again put that into chat, that URL. It should be in the chat now. Let me know if you received that and you are able to see. So this is the basically repo where you can see some articles that are linked to my um, um, Cloud Marathoner blog post. But all the samples and everything are going to come from this repo. Specifically, you would be more interested to look into modules, and then you can also look into the samples. These are the two places where I'm using it a lot. Okay, and then scripts, right? So in the scripts, we'll use Azure CLI, and we'll get up to speed, how you can use those scripts. So these are the main folders of this repo where I would recommend just to look into them. You can find a lot of useful stuff, especially for the beginners. I need to structure it a little bit better. I believe, over the time it grow, but yeah, let me know if you check it and you have any questions. You are always welcome to either ping me here or on the LinkedIn. Okay, it can be used anyway. So let's. This is the link, and we'll come back to the actions later on. Okay, so here what we are going to do now is I talked about Azure Bicep, right? We talked about ARM template. Now let's look into the creating simple Bicep resource, okay, which is going to be, we will use the snippets and automated features of Azure Bicep extension. So to make that happen, again, here in extensions, Let me actually make sure my zooming software also works. Okay, it should come up now. All right. Okay, so here, if in the Bicep extension, this is basically here, like extensions in Visual Studio Code. Once you click on that extensions and then go to the type Bicep there, you would see that you would get this extension, right? Bicep extension. This is very important part of any setup when you are planning to work on Bicep code, because it will have a lot of, a number of good features that will help you to troubleshoot and get started with Azure Bicep language. And in our case now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a simple resource just to get you all started, and then we'll see how it get compiled into ARM template. You can look into differences, and then you have two different ways how to convert that Bicep into a ARM template. And you may ask why I need to do that. At the end of the day, if you get any issues, especially in production, when you try to deploy your resources, your Bicep code, it can be even your Terraform code that gets compiled and you deploy. If you get any issues, you need to look at final output, which is the ARM templates. Yeah, it is kind of a little bit unnecessary in the beginning, you may think, but when you are dealing with real issues, you need to get some understanding of ARM templates. Okay, so let's do that. I'm going to close this, sorry, and go back to here. So what I'm going to do now is I will navigate to this samples folder, okay, which is located here under that repo that I shared on the chat, okay, and then I'm going to right click and say new file, okay. And this new file I will give no, this is not the samples. Let's do it under the modules. Okay, and here under the modules, to create a new file, you just right click here, okay, and say new file, and we'll give the name, very simple name. We'll say simple bicep dot bicep. So what it is, we want to create our first simple bicep language. It says this file already exists. Okay, then we'll say simple, not simple, but new bicep. Let's give it a new name, new bicep. Okay, so so it's empty file here. As you see, I don't have anything, and it just created that. Now what we are going to do, we'll look how we can use the automated features of Azure Bicep extension to get you started. Let's say you want to create your first resource, and the easiest way you can start, uh, putting the resource into the infrastructure as a code is start with a storage account, because it's very simple, and even if you deploy that in your Azure subscription, it's not gonna eat from the cost, right? It's if you don't put anything in that storage account, it's not gonna cost you anything, and you can always deprovision, remove it at the end. So to get started, you type res, which is stands for resource. Okay, oops, let me go back here. So I type res, which stands for resource, and you see there is like this drop down came. You can put a dash there and then type, let's say, storage, right? Because that's what we are trying to create, get started. So once you have that, you can use the tab, okay, or you can also, click on this to see what are. Click on read more. It will give you some template, right? So how it looks like. But let's say in your case, you can also use the tab. Once you click on tab, what happens is that it will give you the initial, declaration of the storage account. And let's say we want to change the name, right? We want to give the name which is more familiar. Let's say it's a cloud launch and learn storage account. Okay. And then the next thing, you see the provider name, Microsoft Storage here, right? You see that. And then you see the actual this resource type, it's a storage account. And then the next thing that you see here after the add sign is the, by default it will give you the API version. It's not always the, latest API version, so you can go and check it. We will do that, but you need to be aware about that. And then after that, after equal sign, it provides the properties that get assigned. In our case, we have name. As you know, storage account has specific limitations in name, right? It should be, at least 3 character long. It cannot have, special signs or any special characters. It should be all numbers and letters up to, I believe, 28 or 23 characters. I would have to check it, but it is at minimum should be three. And then let's look at that. Okay. So here I talked about API version. So if you put at sign again, you would say you get a drop down, and then you would say there is even higher, versions, right? You have 2023 API version, and also starts from 2015. So in our case, you can always go and check the latest API if you need that features. Next, we'll go and put the simple name. You can say Cloud Launch and Learn, storage, and then location. Location is your Azure region. Let's say in our case, I want to put East US, and then of course we need to close this. East US 2 is another region. There are a number of regions in US, but for you, if you are doing development, you need to put the Azure region that's closest to you or to your customers where you are going to deploy that resource. Next, we have storage v2, which is the kind, and then the SKU, right? What type of storage you want to deploy? Is it? And there are number of choices that you see here on the screen. For development purposes, I would recommend to go with a locally redundant. That's the cheapest. If you are not doing, this deployment for production reasons, or you don't using those features, you can always go with locally redundant. But if you need some extra redundancy, you can also consider other options like geo redundant zones and stuff like that. Okay, so we put this, and this is our first storage account. Okay, so what we get out of it, not much at the point. We just defined a simplistic resource, but I will show you some features here of Azure Bicep extension. So if you right click on this, you would see you have a number of options here. And namely, the option that we are interested to look in is called build ARM template. Why? Because at the end of the day, whatever you do in Bicep code or any other infrastructure as a code for Azure environment, it needs to get compiled or transpiled into ARM templates. That's what happens under the hood. And if you can do that on your own to make sure that there is no issues while getting that translation, you basically verify the things, make sure that it's gonna work, when you are doing it actually for deployment. So that's the reason. So let's go and click on that. So this is simplest way to do that, but I'm going to show you from terminal as well. And then we get here new file created. Okay, once we do that, we get this new bicep.json file created, which is the compiled or transpiled version of bicep code into ARM template. Let's look at that. And to make it easy, let's actually, divide this. Okay, no, let's make this one. Hmm, There's a split to the right. Okay, that's good. So what we have here is now, let me take this out. We have two pieces of code, right? On the left side, we have ARM template here, which is a lot of, much longer. And on the right side, we have a simple explanation of simple version of Bicep where we started coding our infrastructure as a code. So what's the difference here? Okay, is that on the left side you have a full-blown ARM template, which is pretty big. So when you look at that, what we see is we have the schema of ARM template on the left. Let me make it bigger here. Okay, so it should start with a schema because it's a JSON file. Then you get the metadata saying, what was used to create this. It says this was used the Azure Bicep and specific version. You have a template hash, and then you have the same declaration of the storage, right? It used the storage provider, Microsoft Storage. It used this resource type or provider is the storage account here, uh, you know and then we have this API version, same version that we made a change. If you remember, we picked up the latest after the creation, and then it gives the same name, which is the CLL, which is Cloud Launch and Learn Storage, and then you have a storage type, and then you have the SKU. So it's pretty much the same, but it's done and represented using the JSON representation. Okay, so That's all cool, but let's say you don't want to use right click. You want to use your terminal to do those things, and then you have a support for that. I'm going to go and right click and delete that JSON file because we don't need that. And I'm going to go to the terminal, and this is our file, right, where we have it. Now, let me increase the terminal here. Yep. So with the terminal, when you have that, let me actually clean it. So what you can do, you can look at Azure Bicep version that's currently installed. You can say AZ Bicep, and then you can actually, to get started with the help, you can say dash dash help. It will bring you all the commands that you can use with Azure Bicep. As you see here, you can have a build command. You can have a decompile, which will take your ARM template and decompile auto into the Bicep. It may not look the prettiest, but it is auto, right? So it's a place where you can start. um, you can generate the parameters using this thing, as well as you can install uninstall specific versions of Bicep. This is very helpful. So in our case, again, if you want to know the version of Bicep that's installed, you can say AZ Bicep, and then version. It's one of the commands here. Yeah, you may not have the latest if you did it before. In my case, I think, yeah, it's not the latest, but it's there. Okay, you can always upgrade to the newest. Next, what you can also have here, you can look at the list of them and everything. But in our case, we want to use this build parameter, right? So why you want to use build? Because build one is the most helpful. So if you say AZ bicep and then build, that's the name of command. And then let's say you want to get some help. That what I'm doing here. I type this in order to get some help. Okay, to see how you can utilize that command, and then you get this whole infrastructure that explains you specifically, how it works. You see, there's like AZ bicep build. Then you need to provide the file name, and then it will build an ARM template and put that in the same folder where your original bicep file is. So let's do that. Let's do that from terminal. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to say AZ bicep, okay, and then we'll put the build command, and then we need to put the file name where it's located. You can put the file name, or there's abbreviation F, which stands for the file, and then let's put the location name. So in our case, it's under the modules. I'll say I'll tap mod and press on tab. That's kind of good feature about using this Visual Studio Code. It will, find that directory, which is modules, and then our bicep file name start with new bicep, right? It is here. Now let me show it again. So we want to compile this bicep into ARM template, right? So into that JSON structured file. So let's do that. I'll type new and then put the dash and then just press on the tab, and then it will pick up the rest, like bicep dot bicep. And then once we enter and execute this command, what should happen is it will try to build from that ARM bicep code a JSON formatted ARM template. Let's do that. So while it is doing that, you see I have these yellow kind of warnings. This is because I have a bicep config file. I will talk about that, but this is the way how you can structure the whole experience, how you want this thing to work. But once this finished, if you go back again to that folder structure where we had our uh, new dash bicep file created, you will see that now we have our JSON file also created. And that's the you know that's just one example how you can use Azure Bicep command line to interact with that and get started. Okay, and usually when you use these automated tools like GitHub Actions and other ones where you want to run compilation or build your ARM template from Bicep code, and then run some verifications, you use those command lines and you put them into the into the jobs that GitHub workflow is running through, and we'll come to that. Okay, so this is how we did that. Great. Next, what we're gonna do, and if you click on this JSON file, you would see more or less the same thing that we just looked into that. All right, so that's it. Let me now switch gears back to the place from where we came. This was the presentation. So here, I think now you have a good understanding what's the Bicep language, right? From that simple demo. But what are the benefits? So benefits is it's easy to understand. You saw that it's a much simpler code to define resources. Then it has day zero support, meaning that whatever changes in API of Azure resources happen, it's going to be reflected right away on your Azure Bicep code. And what I mean by that is whenever you try to update your resource and put the specific API version, you would be able to see that feature, that new property or whatever that came from there, so that you can use the latest right from the day zero. While if you use the third-party tools like Pulumi, or it can be Terraform, there you are dependent on the vendor to make those changes. Okay, if it takes them a month, 2 months, I don't know what's the time frame there, then you would have to wait that much to utilize this new feature. And sometimes it can be just a fix, a bug fix that you still will wait for that to happen. So you eliminate the dependency on third-party tool by switching into native tool in Azure called Azure Bicep language. So we already mentioned that it's a transparent abstraction over ARM template. Then we say that it comes with this tooling in Visual Studio Code, Bicep extension, namely. It comes with clean code syntax. We have code reuse and modularity. So I'm going to show you modules after this one, how you can reuse your code in Azure Bicep while you are building that. Then we'll look into some, it comes with deep and I would say flawless integration with Azure, which is not a surprise, I believe. And it comes with some pre-flight validation. This is, if you remember, there was a question about what if we can improve that. I agree with it. So pre-flight validation, it's pretty useful, but there are instances where you get pre-flight validation as a green, meaning that everything should be okay. But in certain instances, your deployment, may get into some issues. So that's where this experimental feature is still needs to be, kind of hashed out and get into better shape. Uh, with Azure Bicep, you don't have any state management, meaning that you don't have to have this state file that uh, you have to maintain with, let's say, with Terraform, right? So because state machine of Azure itself, it will check what you have deployed already to the given resource or resource group in your subscription, and it will tell you what's the difference. So if you don't have to carry and maintain the state file with Azure Bicep, there's no such a concept. Okay, because state machine itself is the Azure environment that helps you. And it comes with production support. If you get into trouble or any issues while working with this on the deployment or updates to your Azure environment, you can always open an official Microsoft ticket. They would help you. Okay, how to start with Azure Bicep, right? So we kind of touched it, but there are like two ways that you can get started. One of them is to utilize this awesome community-driven GitHub called Awesome Azure Bicep. I'm also helping people to get upskill on that. So if you go to the, to my GitHub repo, I'm actually trying to use that now. There's some slowness in the network. I hope my voice is clear. Okay. So here if you navigate to the Awesome Azure Bicep it has more than 10 contributors. Let it come up. There's some slowness on the internet. I'm apologize for that. Bicep language, I just made it bigger, and this is where you'll end up. So with this repo, you have a number of articles and some videos. You can get started with Azure Bicep as well. So this is the one that I want to show. We have contributors here, a number of them. So join the club. You are always welcome to create your new PR for this GitHub. All right. So when you get started with Azure Bicep, I would recommend if you want to install that, you can always install first Azure CLI. All right. Yes, Alan, that might be good. I agree. So I see there's a cloud launch learn, insert some funds into the meter elk. Yeah, that would work. Sure. So with Azure Bicep, before installing that, I just want to mention that you would also want to go and probably, oops, before this, you want to go and install Azure CLI. So Azure CLI tool is a cross-platform. You can also do it through the PowerShell. It's also, new version is cross-platform. Once you install the Azure CLI, you can look into the, there's like different install that you can go through. I'll put that in the chat. Go to the, depending what operating system you have, right? If you have Windows, you can go with these instructions. And then once you install that in AZ, as we did that with the, with Bicep, I will show that with the, on the terminal here. So you can say AZ version. This is the Azure CLI version that's running on your machine. So if you don't have it, just install Azure CLI, and then uh, with 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 Azure CLI itself, you also have a command where you can upgrade that. But the most important thing that you can also, install Bicep here. Okay, that's coming part of this. As you see here, let me show. So it comes with Bicep, kind of, group of commands. You can, once you have Azure CLI, you can also install Bicep using this tool. Okay, and you can also upgrade it. Okay, that said, let's move here with the presentation. I know that we are almost there. Um, and I will go a little bit faster here due to the name. So when you do Azure Bicep, it's actually started in 2020 as an alpha, which was August 28th. And then it evolved. And on the March 1st, 2021, it came with the first supported version 0.3.1 that you can, use and open your tickets. Now it's in the version way beyond that. And then we expect version 1.0, stable version 1.0. Hopefully this year. There was no, promise from the Azure Bicep team, but that's where we go. And then let's look at some Bicep code and Visual Studio Code, specifically the IDE related configurations. We'll look into Bicep config file. That's very helpful to tune it up to your development style and your team's development style. We'll look into what you need to know about that. It comes with the organized with analyzers. We'll look into that Bicep config file. You will look into some default configurations and how you can tune it up. Okay, so what is this Bicep config file? Let's look at that. And then actually, I'm going to show you the settings as well. And then we'll jump into the GitHub workflows, okay? Because we don't have much time, I will just show where it is so you can, look at that. Then if you have any questions or if you have any feedback, just let me know. All right, let's switch to Visual Studio Code now. So in Visual Studio Code, I'm going to, come back here. And here, when we go to the Bicep config file, let me actually, take this down. So how you get create that? It's also for the new file. Is you see it's located in Bicep config file here in my repo. It's not under the main, root folder, which means that it's gonna this Bicep config file is something that Azure Bicep before building your ARM templates, before building Bicep code into ARM templates, it will look at the rules that are part of this Bicep config. And I'm going to put the link in the chat where you can get more understanding about these rules. But this is the way how you can basically manage your compile, how you want your code to appear and react. So in this case, by default, you can, if you want to install that and you don't have it, you can always go to this, use your GUI under the view. You have this command palette. Okay, you go there, click on it, And then here you can type, bicep, and then con, like config, right? So once you type that and you choose this section, then depending on which folder you are, it's going to create that bicep config file for you. Okay, and it's going to be in the beginning a blank. You may get some default configurations if it is blank, but you can adjust them. So that's how you create that. And once you have that created, which in my case it's here situated here, what you do basically is you just add or remove or enable disable certain things. So in our case, let's say I say that, okay, here in the line number 10, I say if you have unused parameter, then show it as a warning. So warning means that will be yellow squiggly line, red is would indicate some type of error. And error actually means that if you have error like here, it would stop from compiling your bicep code into ARM template, meaning that you'll get the actual error. It's going to be shows. It's going to be stopper basically. You would have to address that. And this is something maybe you want to have in place as a team, because you don't want some, especially with the security stuff like security, your hard-coded URLs, or maybe some identifiers. You want to make sure they don't end up in your code, right? It needs to come from some type of uh, configuration or from some type parameter file which you can swap during the environment deployment, so it's not checked in into your code repository. That's really uh, against the security recommendations. Okay, so here we have different rules. In addition to that, you have module aliases. What it is, if let's say you want to use some public modules, public Bicep modules provided by Microsoft, you want to enable those aliases. You can also have your uh, own container, Azure, container where you can have these modules, saved and version control for your organization. So that type of things are defined also here. And then you have these experimental features that you can enable or disable them. You can have another section here in your Bicep config, and you basically tune up your process. So let's show how it affect your actual Bicep code. So to do that, let me, look here. Yes. So basically, to see how it's going to affect your file, we can always, go and look into let's look at the some example. So let's say there's example number 14 in my repo. So we'll go to the samples, and then there's like this example number 14, deploy child parent, scenarios. So before going further here, I want to say that when you deal with Bicep code or any new code, it's hard to get started with that, right? What does it mean? Of course, if you have a paid, subscription with Copilot, you can ask your GitHub Copilot to explain that to you, right? So that's one way how you can deal. But another way is if you want to understand the relationship between resources, you can also go and use Azure Bicep Visualizer, which is this icon on the right side. This icon comes with okay, let me make sure it's actually bear. Okay, is it bear like this? Yeah. So once you click on that, it will take all the resources kind of and graphically visualize them. So let's look at that. Okay, so this code on the left, what it does basically deploys a bunch of different storage accounts. And as you see, there's some relationship between themselves because some of them are containers using given storage account. In our case, we have one storage account, right? And then we have containers that are linked to each other. So that's what it does. So in this code, you can go and look at that, but it explains you three different options how you can create your storage account using the parent resources or child resources. I'm not going to dive into that. This is just example. But here, let's see how our compiler will work, right? That's the main idea here. I'm going to come to this place here, okay? And I will create a parameter, but I'm not going to use that. I will say param, and then let's say it's a new value, and let's say it's a string, and and we don't define anything. It's a parameter that needs to be entered. If you want a default value, you can always put your default value by default, right? So here, as you see, we get this yellow squiggly line, and there is a bulb on top of it. It would say that, hey, do you want to add description or any other thing? So in our case, this is yellow line comes because we put it as a warning, right? So there, and here it says, sorry, let me zoom in. Say it's declared this new, but it's never used. That's the issue why it's complaining, and we looked at that in our Bicep config file. So if you go and make it informational or remove that, it will not complain. But it's a good practice, to not have any objects to play, anything that's declared in your code that's not used be there, right? So if there's no need for that, just remove it. So this is, one way how it works. This is the simplest way to explain it, and you can, look at further into that. Okay, so next, I would say with the Visual Studio Code, extension, I want to show more features of this visualizer. For example, here, if we go and look into this, number 10, sample number 10, where it deploys multiple resources, then we'll go navigate to our, visualizer icon here again. I don't think it's done. Let me make it better here. Okay, this is the icon here. So once you click on it, let's see what happens. So this time you see that it actually deployed uh, two different resource groups. We have app resource group and we have a storage module, and it will tell what type of resources are deployed here. I think it's pretty neat, especially if you are not, well versed in understanding everything, you're just getting started. Use this Bicep visualizer. You can also use it for ARM templates, it's also there, but you need to make sure you have extensions installed to make it work. Okay, all right, that's it. Let me show you some some experimental features, and then briefly go to the you know how you can use the GitHub workflow with Bicep. So with experimental features, the one that I want to show is here. If you go and click on this, probably you are, very familiar with that. So, if you are, that's cool. But if not, here we have a gear sign, right? So these are the settings that you have on your Visual Studio. If you go there and select the settings, let's do that. Sorry, sometimes this coughing. Let me In search bar, we are going to type biceps, and you can do that yourself as well if you have Visual Studio Code running in front of you. Let's type bicep. And what we get here is you have this two selection. One is on the editor itself if you want to change anything. Another one is the extension itself. So we'll look into the extension. And as you see, there are like different features here. One of the things that you may like or dislike that you want to switch or switch off, so to speak, is decompile on paste. Meaning that if you take, for example, a JSON file and it's a, let's say, bicep code, and you just drop it there, it will try automatically decompile that and put their auto-generated file, which again, it's not perfect. You may or may not like it. And same thing done for the JSON ARM template. Then you can, if you get very frustrated with the surveys that coming up here, uh, asking you for some feedback, if it is distracting for you, you can also, disable that. And there are some more features here. So another thing is, for example, deployment pane. They work and sometimes they don't work as expected because it's experimental feature. If you don't want them to appear on your right click, you just, disable, and it will not appear on your right click. Okay. So here, these are the features that you can, enable or disable based on your preference. I will continue here a bit faster because we are on the top of hour here. So productivity tips is, you know, know your settings, how you can, enable, disable them if they are annoying, or if you don't, or if you want to use them, because sometimes they came as disabled. So I would say go and look. So these are the latest, productivity tips or productivity settings you can do with those experimental features. Some of them are illustrated here, like disabling the or enabling the deployment pane. These are the new ones that I just show you. It's a screenshot from the display that we just looked into. This is the bicep visualizer. If you look at the module number 7 of deployment, you can also get this pretty picture there, and you can get some understanding how those things are related to each other. Okay, so in this case, if you look at this, deployment, we have a Windows deployment, Windows machine app service. We have a database. We have a storage account. There's a number of things that might be interesting for you. Next here, I had these demos over over the course of presentation. So you saw some of them. We looked into bicep config file, how you can get started, create one, and then modify that. Now the last one is automating your GitHub workflow. So what it is basically in the same so in the same Visual Studio Code, where we'll go back now. I'm going to close the settings, and you would see that here under the GitHub workflows, I have certain GitHub workflows set it up, especially for this repo. So what it does is if you open it, you will see that I have here oops, four YAML files, right? So we have this first, second. So the one that's actually enabled and working is the security one, and the security scan, and as well as main.deployment YAML file. And I want to show you not a secret, but I want to kind of clarify that with you. So if you look at the first one here, so the name of this YAML, even though there's a file name and you know, uh, there's a workflow name. So the workflow name is actually Azure Run Login with OIDC. So what it does basically about making sure that um, when you run your GitHub workflow, it can authenticate with your Azure environment. Okay, it takes a token exchange and stuff like that. This is the preferred way to do that without using the app registrations and secrets. So you don't have to renew them every other 1 year or 2 year. So the next one is deployment YAML. So I call it just CI, which is the continuous integration. Okay, and then we have main deployment. I'm going to stay more on this file because that's the one that's main used. What it does is basically that's the name, deploy main site. It goes, and if there's any pull request or any push to the main branch of the repo, in our case it's the repo name is learn dash bicep, the link I just shared in the beginning of the session. And then it defines this Azure environment resources, and there's a test location as well of the code. And then you would see that it goes through the jobs. So I have a linting job, I have a validation job. Okay, and then I have a deployment job as part of this workflow. And then if you scroll down at the end, we have a smoke test. So what does smoke test do? It's just make sure that the app that get deployed, it's actually up and running, and it's using the pester container to do that testing. So whenever I deploy code, okay, into the not everywhere, but whenever I deploy my code into sorry, into this location, whenever there's a change in deploy.main bicep, then it's actually going to deploy those changes. But other than that, it will just run the compilation and make sure that everything compiles. So how you see that in action, you'll you'll have to switch to the GitHub workflow. sorry sorry, just a second. I had a little bit cough here. Sorry for if you hear something, but yeah, this is the seasonal allergies that are killing us, or make it a little bit. Anyway, so we are back in Learn Bicep, and here you will see that workflows that we just looked into, they are all defined here. Okay, and in terms of the how they get executed and everything. So once you deploy them under the actions here in your GitHub workflow, GitHub environment, you will see that those workflows are named here. They are named by the name of the workflow, not by the name of file, of course. And here, as I mentioned, deploy.main site. This is the one. You can click on it, and then I have some positive, but I also had some errors here. It's always good to learn from the errors. But if you go and let's say click, so this is the deployment main site. This is the one that's used to deploy this code. And then, you know, um, what I would say is that if you want to look at the code itself to make sure it's matching your workflow, these are the job pipelines that we talked about. If you remember, I mentioned 4 jobs within the workflow. This is where it is. And then if you want to look at the workflow file, it's also defined here. You can scroll down and make sure it's there. Okay, so this is how you define it. And on your new push to the workflow, it's going to go and create that. All right, that's it. Let me go back to we are over the time here a little bit. So let's make sure we finalize our. So if you want to learn about Azure Bicep, I'm actually writing a book with Kasun. He's a Microsoft Azure MVP as well. So, stay tuned for that. I will, share the link in the chat so you can check it out. It's not ready yet. We are working on it, but I'm open for any suggestions. You can check it out on Amazon and let us know what you think or what type of, let's say, chapters you want to have that in the book. Next, I will check I think Alan and other team members did a great job by interacting in the chat. Thank you everyone for, being part of it and answering some of the questions. I don't see any outstanding question at the moment. So we learned about again, we get started refreshed with Azure Bicep. We looked into new benefits of this language. We looked into some productivity tips. We had a bunch of demos in the process of understanding and compiling and using the Azure Bicep code. And then finally, we look into some demos, right? And we also learn about GitHub workflows, how you can integrate there, even though we didn't cover them extensively. But if there's a desire for that, let me know. I may just, create a new session for that and share that with all of you. All right. So in terms of links, right, how you can get started, these are the good place to get started. You have this Learn Bicep module that I just shared with you. You have this Azure Bicep First Look and Building Infrastructure as a Code with Bicep LinkedIn courses. You can also have this awesome GitHub here on the right side that you can get started and look into some resources to get up to speed and maybe open even your first PR, right? You're welcome. All right. I want to say thank you everyone for joining this session today. It was great pleasure having all of you and welcome again. You're welcome to check our next Cloud Lunch and Learn session next week. And have a great day, everyone. Thank you for joining this session. And this is the end of it. Thank you, Mazda, for putting the message there. Thank you, Shizan. If sorry if I butchered your name, but it's sounds like that. Have a great day. Thank you, Alan, for your again joining this session with Usman and checking the syncs. Uh, again, any questions, please reach out. I'll cover them for you and have a wonderful day. Uh, take care, guys. Bye.